joining us on today's program. What do I have today in today's program? The Gathering of Africa's Best Awards have been in existence for almost 20 years now, and a lot of recipients from Africa and from other parts of the world have received awards from the GAB Awards. Now, the question has always been, we get all these awards, people have got these awards and have shown their achievements, and have, but what have we achieved as far as the GAB Awards are concerned? My guest today will shed some light on this issue because he's the founder member of the GAB Awards, Femi Okutubo. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Steve.
As I said at the beginning, well, why the GAB Awards?
The reason the GAB Awards started was that we noticed that there was a lot of negative stereotypes and negative publicity about who we are as Africans. There was a time that hardly would any Sunday go by where the mainstream British newspapers would not have a negative report about an African, and reports describing Africans as fraudsters, as benefit cheats, as treasury suckers, as people who are out to do no good. And we felt that this wasn't really a true representation of who we are. So there was the need to sort of try and combat that. And we decided first to start a newspaper, and two, to also start an awards ceremony.
The Trumpet Newspaper. Yeah.
The Trumpet Newspaper. Yeah. So the whole idea of the newspaper, Trumpet Newspaper, was to highlight and report more on the positive activities of Africans here in the UK. And then the awards was a way of rewarding people who were contributing to the promotion of excellence within the African community.
Yeah, and the whole idea, it's a very good idea. And the surprise is that none of the mainstream newspapers picked up on all I should ask, did you go to them and say, look, we have these awards for the Africans. Can anyone, you send them the stories to report on it, to write on it, or you even putting it on television or radio? Did that happen?
Well, we sent out press releases. We had a few interviews, but again, not necessarily enough attention from the mainstream media. But I've always believed that there's no better person to tell the African story other than Africans themselves. And I think, over the years, and with the way technology has gone, with the advent of the internet, with social media as well, it's so easy to tell. It's a lot easier to tell the African story. And, whether or not mainstream pays attention to it is a different story. But I think one thing we've definitely been able to do is to, even if we've not had enough mainstream media attention, we've definitely had a lot of attention from mainstream in terms of the political class and the leadership class. So, for example, we've had members of parliament attend the event. We've received words of commendation from the Prime Minister's office about the GAB Awards. She's sent in a message in the past. And we've had that from politicians. We've had that from captains of industry, business leaders, and so on. So I think the awards definitely, over the past almost 21 years, has definitely been able to achieve what it set out to achieve.
Okay. Now, what are some of the difficulties? Because obviously, the past 20 years, there has to have been some kind of where you reached a level when you say, you know what, this is it, or so-and-so has let you down, or something like that. Because organizing such a big event is not that very easy. I've seen people organize things in a year or two, and in the next 3-4 years, you don't hear anything. Things have started up, especially our things, meaning us, the Africans. And they go on, after some time, there's no continuity of it. What are some of these difficulties?
Well, one thing I would say is that sometimes we feel that even the community that we're trying to sort of promote is not giving it the kind of support and backing it should. I think that was, at least that happened a lot, especially in the very early days, where people didn't really catch on to the vision quite quickly. But I think that's improved. I wouldn't necessarily say it's at the level that would love it to be, but it's definitely, people have definitely caught on to the vision. But I think it's also a case of also getting the community to put its money where where its mouth is. So in terms of the financial impetus to make sure that the awards is able to grow. Because at the end of the day, yes, we are investing into it, but we also expect the community to invest into it. And even if it's from as little as, people buying tickets, you get so many people who are calling us up wanting free tickets to the event. And then you begin to wonder that, well, if we give out free tickets and there's there's not enough sponsorship, there's not enough advertising revenue, there's not enough money to run the event, how are we expected to continue to run the event year after year? So I think that's been a bit of a challenge. But again, I think we've persevered. We held our 20th annual edition last year. We've been able to do it every year without fail. By the grace of God, we took the event to Manchester last year. So again, we're expanding, it's growing. What we've also found out as well is that so many people are interested in the awards. It's one of the most prestigious and most coveted within the industry. There have been so many awards events that have actually been set up. But I know that over the years, and even now, there's been quite an advent of awards events. And like you rightly identified, some have come and gone. But GAB Awards is one that people really look forward to. And it's one that people are actually proud to add to their CV. And I think that's a testimony to the diligence that we've put into organizing the awards, and the fact that this is not the kind of award where you can buy. Because again, sadly, there's a bit of a reputation among a few awards events where it's a case of, well, if you pay money to someone, maybe you might be able to get an award. GAB Awards does not fall into that category. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's well respected.
Now, the African diplomats in the UK, in the beginning, they embraced it. And I remember Professor Kiria from the Ugandan High Commission was one of the recipients and one of the first people to attend the event when it started way back. And of course, I think Sierra Leone and Nigeria, of course, was so interested, and to a certain extent Ghana. But the momentum for the diplomats went down, and it's like they need somebody to stick them up and say, look, this is an African event, you better calm down, or something like that. What efforts are you doing to try and get these people in? Because unless something happens...
No, put it this way. To a limited extent, I would say we've definitely we still continue to enjoy the support of our diplomatic missions. Maybe not as much as we would love to, and not as many countries as would love to. And even though you find out that most of the time, obviously, the diplomats would come in on a complimentary basis. But what you also find as well is that perhaps some of the diplomatic missions here, especially for the smaller African countries, are probably struggling. They have their own challenges as well, in terms of the fact that, without mentioning any names, I'm aware of one or two high commissions or diplomatic missions that are even unable to pay their staff salaries on time. Some have actually had to close down their embassies. Some have actually had to, probably move the mission away from UK to probably France and so on, or Belgium and so on. So again, they've got their own challenges as well. But we still reach out to them. We still try as much as possible to keep them in the loop. And we still have some that do attend the events. But I think on our part as well, we've also had to limit the number of diplomatic that we invite every year. Because if you're looking at potentially 54 African countries, okay, we may not have that many in the UK, but you're probably looking at least 40 who are in the UK or probably somewhere in Europe. And if we were to invite each one, you know, you're looking at times 2 because they'll come with their spouse.
Yeah.
That's about 80.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have a budget to be able to accommodate, you know, such. That's why we usually limit the invitations. The last awards, for example, was attended by the Nigeria High Commissioner, for example, and his wife, a distinguished Nigerian, you know, retired justice. And he definitely was able to add color to the event.
Okay.
And he was also impressed with the event as well, considering that the event had been going for so long.
Yeah. Now, there is always that element which I've discovered, being a Ugandan myself, and from the other part of Africa, the East African region, that when something is started by a Nigerian, or if it's started by a Ghanaian, there is the tendency to say, oh, that's a Ghanaian event. It's nothing to do with us. Or that's, you know, so that kind of thing has sort of limited Africans participating in certain events. And certainly attending the GAB Awards over the years is something that I've come across every now and then. Now, there is that element where said, okay, Nigerians, if they're invited, I have to say you're Nigerian, they come in large numbers, but the other parts of Africa, it becomes a bit difficult for them to come. Is there something that you try to do to encourage them to be part of this event?
Well, put it this way. In the first instance, when you look at the population of Africans in the UK, you find that a considerable number of the Africans are Nigerians. So it's only natural that ratio would reflect in terms of
their attendance,
or in terms of the attendance. But we've definitely opened up we've opened up the awards to the whole community, and that will reflect, for example, through the performances, through the award recipients as well. So we've had, and in fact there were times where, especially in the early days, and as a conscious effort, what we did was that every year we would have a theme country. For quite a number of years we chose a number of African countries, especially non-West Africa, well, non-Nigerian, I should say. So there was a conscious effort. There was a year where it was Kenya. There was another year where it was Ethiopia. You know, there was another year it was Angola, and so on and so forth. So, and that has achieved, you know, some level of results. But again, it's a balancing act as well. So we don't necessarily want to do African character for the sake of, in terms of trying to, you know, what we want to do is encourage merit. So we're not going to say that we're so desperate to, you know, give an awards to people if they're not meriting it. And no disrespect. We're not necessarily saying that, you know, that there aren't achievers. So we are working hard. The best we can do is publicize as much as possible, so that at least we have people from various parts, you know, various African countries as recipients. But I think what we've also done as well, because you also need to understand as well that sometimes when you look at the demographics as to where different countries are, you might find out that certain communities are even based more outside London in comparison to London itself. And that's why we've now expanded the GAB Awards to Manchester. And there are plans to further expand that to various major cities within UK, as a way of, one, reaching out to various Africans wherever they may be, but also, rather than expect someone up north of England or in Glasgow or Scotland to come down to London for an awards event, we want to take the event there as a way of recognizing the fact that we have African achievers around the country.
Now, something else as well, which attracted my attention, and this is the fact that we got Arabs who are part of Africa, and we got white South Africans who are part of Africa, who are Africans, in fact. And saying that, I came across one Tunisian at one event, and in fact I discussed the GAB Awards with him, and I said, look, this event is at the Hilton, could you come around? And he says, no, that's not for me. And I said, no, what do you mean it's not for you? Yeah, because if the word Africa is there, you are an African. And he didn't really sound that they are convinced especially our northern neighbors, that, you know, Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, and so on, that we have, when we say Africa, we don't involve them. And I can notice that from the awards that were given over the years, that recipients from those countries haven't really been that many. Then it also comes to the white South African. There's a white Zimbabwean farmer who once told me, said, look, I think he was reading one of the papers, and he was reading the Trumpet Newspaper, and he was saying, no, again, this is not for me. And I said, hang on a minute, you're an African, because to me, these are Africans too. Now, the question I'm heading for is, are you catering for these people as well in some ways? Because they have also got achievers among them, okay, that we need to start recognizing as Africans.
Okay. Put it this way, the African Union defines what African is in terms of the various countries and so on.
Yeah.
And most of those countries you mentioned, in fact, all those countries you mentioned are in Africa.
Yeah.
So as far as we're concerned, the event is open to them. Now, let me start by saying that even in the past, we've had the diplomat from Tunisia, either the deputy ambassador or so, attend our events. So again, I would say that there is some recognition that they're an African country at that level. So anyone who is thinking otherwise, I think it's their own, their own choice, their own prerogative. But the way to look at it again is that at the end of the day, the world, we're all one humanity. So all these things in terms of the divisions, I think they're not necessary. They're not things we encourage. They're not things that we promote. And for example, there was a year we had a Zambian. But even the Zambian, he's actually more Asian looking. In fact, he looks more Asian than African. But he proudly associates himself, and not even associates, he proudly regards himself as an African.
Okay.
Obviously, Africa has its history. So whether you're talking in terms of South Africa, where at one point, yes, we had maybe we had apartheid and so on, but all that is in the past, should be in the past. We have, whether it's in terms of the white Zimbabwean, as far as we're concerned, they're all Zimbabweans.
Yeah. But in terms of giving them awards, this is where the whole thing is. When the selection is done, and the reason is that when they look at themselves and they don't look at somebody who is one of them receiving the award, maybe this is where they say, hang on a minute, this thing is not for us.
There's no reason to think that way, because even if you are not an African, for a minute, even if you're not an African, the awards is actually open to Africans and friends of Africa. So for example, we have people who are Europeans who, through what they do, are actually contributing to the positive image of Africa. And they qualify for an award. For example, at the last GAB Awards, we had a gentleman, I think he's Dutch, but he's the one behind what we call Pluvera chicken. They actually manufacture Pluvera chicken, which is something that is very popular in Europe within the African community. And for the average African household, you might not know, because it looks like you probably don't go to the kitchen too often. but for those of us that go to the kitchen, we know Pluvera chicken. And we were able to award him, give him an award for the impact that particular product has had, because there was something unique about that chicken in the sense that I think it's easier to cook. It's not it's quite crunchy and so on and so forth. So again, that's an example of even a non-African who's been awarded. So it's not about color or anything. So not to now talk of someone who has African citizenship or nationality, they automatically qualify.
Okay, I do understand that, but the reason why I'm mentioning is that when it comes I think this could be settled by the selection committee that sits down to make the selection of these awards. In that maybe is something you can explain to our viewers, in a sense that over the period of a year when you have to select those who have achieved. And of course, the sponsorship issue can be looked at from a different angle, because with so many Africans achievers, so many of them would be interested in doing the sponsorship. But the whole idea is that the selection of who is going to get the awards, how is that based on? Someone listening or viewing us would say, oh, he's the founder. How do they make that selection? How does the team, do you go out looking? Do you read the papers? How do you select the winning team?
Okay, it's a 3-stage process. Okay. Nominations are actually open to members of the public.
All right.
And all that information is on our website, which is gabawards.com, gabawards.com. So nominations are open to the public.
Yeah.
We are also able to throw some names into that hat, because through the fact that we publish a newspaper for the diaspora African community, we work within the African community. We've done so for 24 years.
Yeah.
So we do have some experience and some knowledge of the community and some of our achievers.
Okay.
So we're able to throw those names into the into the hat as well. And then what tends to happen is, from all the nominations that we receive, we now try and sift our strongest number of entries. So usually we might get about 200 entries.
Wow.
In terms of those wanting to pick up an award. We'll probably streamline that down to about maybe 50 names of finalists. And then from the finalists, we now announce roughly about 20 recipients on the awards night itself. So, but I think the bottom line, in terms of answering your question, is that it is open to the public.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
You know, and usually when we do quite a bit of publicity in terms of opening up the awards to members of the public.
Now, with the funding issue, the sponsorship issue is a major thing. I remember Mo Ibrahim, the Sudanese billionaire, when he was offering all these donations to African leaders for good governance and so on, one of the questions that was put to him was connected with looking at other people other than the leaders, because he's giving up awards, he's giving money to leaders who leave office. I hope you've heard of him.
Yeah.
If they lead well and blah, 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 and he's made to give. And so far, he has very few recipients as far as that's concerned. Now, the move has been that some of the money is moved away now from the top people and goes to the ground, the people who are at the bottom of the pile. Say, there are people who are also doing a lot of genuine good things among the Africans, and who needs to be rewarded with maybe sums of money, sums of something like that. But what I'm coming to is the question of sponsorship. Such people could be very good sponsors if they're approached, you know, and maybe with the companies that deals with Africa. I don't know how far wild you've gone in expanding this whole issue, because it's been in existence for 20 years, and that alone qualifies it to really be a big honor in terms of those who are going to be recipients for this.
Well, put it this way, people that sponsor events, either people or companies that sponsor events, sponsor it most of the time because there's something they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So even when you look at the Mo Ibrahim Good Governance Awards, obviously it was something that was started to sort of reward corrupt-free, leaders, and it's quite ironic that there weren't too many people that were able to meet that criteria among African leaders. But coming back to the GAB Awards itself, in terms of sponsorship, there's a lot that sponsors are looking at. So it's not just in terms of the length of the year. I think, again, it's in terms of, whatever their vision is in terms of their corporate social responsibility. It's also in terms of, who exactly they're trying to reach, at what time are they trying to, reach them.
Okay.
And I would probably say that one of the challenges that we've had with our event would be mainly along the lines that because it's been to be able to sort of get sponsors to understand that most of the people that come to the GAB Awards are, what do you call it? They are influencers.
Yeah.
They are community leaders.
Yeah.
They are achievers. So there are people that actually have a circle of influence. So even though you may see one person, but there may be one person who has an influence or a circle of influence that may cover 500 people, 1,000 people, so to speak.
Okay.
At least some of them. But sometimes what the sponsors are looking at are the numbers they can see in front of them.
Right,
Obviously, you're talking about dinners, an awards event, maybe roughly about 200, 250 people.
Okay.
At some time in the past, maybe about 300. And some sponsors might feel, well, rather than I sponsor that event, okay, I'd rather go to another event where maybe it's a concert, for example, that has about 2,000 people.
Okay.
Now, not necessarily looking at the quality of the audience and the demographics of the audience. Because, for example, if you're a money transfer company and we're saying, come and sponsor GAB Awards, because these are the people that actually remit money home. But because of what I'll call ignorance, they'd rather go to maybe an event that has third generation Africans who have no connections with Africa, who have no plans of sending money back home. So it doesn't really make any sense. So usually there's a lot of education that we have to do in that regard. And sometimes some people do get it, sometimes people don't get it. Sometimes the companies actually employ agencies, and all they do is sit, those agents, just sit, open some books without doing proper research. And at the end of the day, they determine where the money goes to. But all those things, I think, is just a matter of time. But I think that's one of the reasons why it is also important for our own community to rally around the event. Because sometimes I always believe that if you don't say here you are, nobody will say there you are. We've got to tell our own story. This is our own event, and there's no reason why we should be waiting on others. That's not to say that we don't want sponsorship from beyond the community, but even the community itself could be doing a lot more.
Now, I've gone through the list of recipients. Of course, it's a massive list for the past 25 years. Musicians, journalists, broadcasters, doctors, engineers, politicians, lawyers, you name it. They have all been given awards. But the list has less women. And yet it has, I should say the angle inclined towards more men. And
I don't know how you come about that.
Listen, I saw the list over a period of time, and I'm not saying that there haven't been women given awards. There have been quite a huge amount of women who have been given awards, but the fact is that the list is bent so the balance is up with the men than the women. It's an issue probably that you are trying to address at the moment, whereby maybe when you're searching and you're looking, there aren't enough women to get these awards, and you probably give it to the men anyway, or something like that. I don't know, because where men and women are competing for the same award, the probability is such that the man will probably get the award and the woman won't get it. A woman told me this, by the way. so I'm trying to see whether when a fair battle. I'm fighting for the sisters here. I hope they're out there, and where there will be a fair kind of battle when it comes down, because as we know, the battle for the sexes has never ended. It's always been there, and I wouldn't want the GAB Awards to be a finger to be pointing at the GAB Awards and saying, look, then you are not doing enough to champion the role of women in our society, or the role of women here, and so on and so forth. I know there are women who have been given awards, and I've been on the event and I've seen so many of them get it. But all I'm saying is that the balance compared to the previous years, the balance is such that more men get the awards than the women. Can that be addressed in the future?
I'm not sure I really agree with you on that. No, I have to be very firm and frank on that. I don't think I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
But having said that, if
we'll check it out.
Let me say that number one, you're the very first person that I've actually heard such a comment from.
Oh, really?
So if it was an issue, I would have expected to have actually heard such feedback in the past. We've not noticed, but I know that from what you've just said, in fact, you've now challenged us because we just give out the awards without necessarily looking at country or gender or religion or anything of that sort. We don't look at those kind of things. But I think for monitoring purposes, you've raised a very interesting point there, and definitely we would go back and probably even look at our awards over the last number of years and probably just do a bit of monitoring or assessment just to see if there is anything happening in terms of the gender balance. But as far as to answer your question, there's no discrimination in terms of male or female for awards, and it is definitely not the case that if a man and a woman are up for an award, that the man would definitely get it. No, there's no such thing. As far as the GAB Awards is concerned. So not unless you're mistaking us for some other events.
Well, the thing is because somebody mentioned it, and when he mentioned it, when I said I'm getting Femi on the station, and Femi is going to talk about this, and he says, well, when he made the comment, and I said, okay, I'll go and do a bit of my research. So I did the research, and I discovered that, and then I said, well, here, and here. But
when you say you did the research, so let's look at the 2018 GAB Awards. How many males, how many females were given awards? Now I've turned the interviewer.
You're catching back to me. You're pushing that to me.
No, but you just said you did the research.
I did. But the thing is I can only tell you in terms of ratios. The ratio on that particular night was, I think there were two or three more men who got the awards than the women. I think that is in last year's event, which I didn't attend, by the way. But the previous event, I think other than two, I can count 3 or 4 women who appeared, including the religious lady. There were about 4 or 5 women, but there were 14 awards in total. Now, if women took 5, how many were? You see my point. So, and the previous year before, again, there were about 4 women. About 4 women who did that, and the year before that, there were about 6 women. So over the period of the number of, because if there are 14 awards, and I'm not saying you should only give out to women as such, or you should, because the merits is extremely important. And but as time goes on, obviously, at some point, maybe even women might sweep the entire board and take the whole awards from the men. It can happen. So it's simply a question of saying maybe over a period of time, whatever policy has been going around, as you're saying, we're not discriminating against the genders and so on. It's a selection of who has achieved, because if you put it in terms of gender again, you'll be probably maybe diminishing the entire, But all I'm saying is that maybe there's a formula that that we don't know about of the selection and how the winners reach the top. That is all.
Like I said, it's a fairly open process.
Yeah.
Nominations are open to members of the public, and we look at the recipients on the basis of merit.
Exactly. Yeah.
You've raised a very interesting point that we've never. In fact, it's the first time that we've had some feedback in that regard.
Yeah.
I am tempted to think that it may not be true.
Yeah.
But what we will do as a responsible organization is go back and look at some of the awards that we've actually done over the last few years, and try and look for an assessment.
And the thing is, maybe the categories are different. But if you look at the categories where music, for example, and you find that those who have achieved a lot in music. You know, it's not a new phenomenon, by the way. It's there in the Oscars. It's there in all these major awards. It's there. You find that men have always, you know, achieved more than the women. So even in the music industry, last year's industry, in the music industry, the MTV Awards, I was watching it, and I also realized that the number of men over a period of time has always been higher. Now, I'm not saying that women are not achievers. They are achievers, but sometimes in the categories where they appear, the other one seems to be, you know. But in terms of Africa, it's a question of, can we maybe have a look and say, okay, we introduce categories where women are the only recipients. Whoever has to win has to be a woman. You know, already there are awards for women anyway. There are women's that are the women's award.
You see, that could look like tokenism.
Okay.
It could look patronizing.
All right.
You know, I'm of the firm belief that there's no reason to give women the special treatment, because they are more than capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with men.
Yeah.
You know, but what I would, like I said earlier on, and like I've said, you know, we will go back and look at what we've been doing, and if we think that there's an issue, then what we need to be doing as a responsible organization is to make sure that we are now looking at ways of ensuring that we can change that balance. Now, not necessarily by the actual recipient's process itself alone, but even right from the nomination process. So could it be a case that we're not having enough nominations from women? In which case we would probably walk the extra mile of trying to make sure that we can get more more nominations from women. We could even, you know, there's something called positive discrimination. So the whole idea might then be, look at a number of African women organizations, or look at ways of actually reaching out to women more, you know, if there is the need to. For example, in the past, we had, I wouldn't say challenges, but we found out that obviously the younger generation were not necessarily well represented in the mix, in the balance. And we've been able to change that. In fact, quite a number of the recipients are actually young persons who are also doing, in fact, what we did then was we introduced what we call the GAB Future Award as a conscious way or conscious effort of actually bringing the next generation. Because the mistake one could make is continue to reward ourselves and forgetting the generation coming
after. About the youth as well. This is something that is, you know, very dear to me. The youth, because they, as you're saying, underrepresentation of the youth, and there is always a tendency to look out for only the top youth, for example, a top footballer, a top boxer somewhere, or, you know, those who have gone beyond. And yet there are those in schools, the 15, 16-year-olds who are doing tennis, who are doing, you know, football, or who are doing theater work, or, you know, who are in that sort of level whereby they are very hard to find because they are hidden there, but they are achievers. And they really, really need to be encouraged to by an award like this one. So it's all a question that's what I was looking at. Say, look, is there a special way of even going deeper into areas, as you are saying now, you've gone to Manchester, to try and find out how some of these youth can be found, or special people who are silent somewhere? Because sometimes someone might not nominate them. He hasn't seen them. You haven't seen them, I haven't seen them, no one has seen them. But somewhere along the way, they appear somewhere in a paper, or they appear somewhere on the internet, or something like that, as, you know, people of our, you know, background, and needs to be encouraged. So is there a special way in which these people can be found?
It's a continuous effort.
Yeah.
And I would say that, for example, through the newspaper itself, we try as much as possible. We've tried to sort of make the publication attractive to that audience as well, especially the university students, in terms of by covering some of the activities, you'll notice that a number of universities have African Caribbean societies, or Nigerian societies, or Ghanaian societies, and so on. So again, we're developing links, we're developing partnerships, we're developing those audiences to sort of attract them to the newspaper. And through that, obviously, if they're in the loop of what is happening around us, they will definitely be in the loop of what is happening around their wards, because somehow they will probably either read it through the publication, or because they're on our database, somehow they will get some information about their wards. But like I said, it's a continuous thing. It's something that we will continue to work hard on. We have awarded a number of young persons and youths in the past, and like I said, even at the last event, we had quite a number of youths or young persons who actually picked up awards. And I think it's important to emphasize about the GAB Awards that we are not about awarding top or awarding celebrities or A-list people. We're looking at people, ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things.
Those people that sometimes are overlooked. Before we go further, I just want to let our viewers know that this program is sponsored by Omega TV, and Omega TV, give us a call if you need anything in terms of publishing. We're going to be here. We're here 24/7 for you. And among things that Omega TV deals with, flyers, posters, folded leaflets, brochures, booklets, bookmarks, banners, stationery, business cards, letterheads, envelopes, folders, notepads, greeting cards, invitations, complimentary cards, postcards, tickets, you name it when it comes to that sort of industry. And the telephone number is 0208-520-3359. That's if you're in the UK, and even if you're abroad, you can call that by adding on, of course, the London or the country code, and give us a call. Remember, it's Omega TV, and we'll be extremely proud to deal with your whichever cases you have in terms of printing. And I do thank them so much for sponsoring today's program. Again, it comes down to when it comes down to whoever is involved, and the issue of politicians. How have you managed to? Because at one time, I remember when I attended one event, and not one event. I've attended so many of them, and I've seen how politicians have tried. Those from Nigeria, those from I think Ghana, and then maybe one of them from Uganda, to try and hijack the event, in a sense that they say, okay, we're probably going to give you this. If this happens, we're going to happen this. We're happy to do this. Remember, one Nigerian politician was talking to one of us, and I couldn't remember whether he was talking to the chief rugby. He was talking to anyway, where he was either one of the governors of the region who attended the event. Can't you remember one of the governors? There have been
I struggle to remember as well.
So the thing is they were talking about, we could make this thing work. We could add more money to this. We could do ABCD for this event. And when a politician or a rich person comes in, there's always about, he's giving the money, but there will be something afterwards, a favor or something like that. How have you fought off this kind of, because it's sometimes the most damaging issue that appears, and then it tips about the balance, because they will need favors as we go along. How have you managed to fight this off?
If such has occurred with the awards, it will probably be very, very rare, to the extent that it's not really been a major issue. In fact, it will probably be more relevant to the newspaper side of things. And one thing we've definitely tried as much as possible to avoid is having politicians as investors. And if we're going to have politicians as investors, then there has to be an agreement that they're not going to interfere in the independence and run-ins of the publication. And that's something we're quite firm and strong about. And that's one thing that I would probably say has made us survive over the years, because the risk of aligning with just one government is that if that government now goes out of power, then you're left out in the the cold. And again, journalism should be independent. And I think the good thing is that even so-called, even that model of, because I'm a politician, I'm going to go and start a medium and I'm going to try and control it. That model is changing. I know of a very popular, very big politician in Nigeria, for example, who owns a newspaper, he owns a magazine, he owns a television station. But when you look at the coverage of his television channel in particular, you'd notice that there's a very good level of independence, because what he's done is, one, he's taken on professionals, and these are professionals who have not just been trained locally, but have probably worked at with international media organizations, and they're able to sort of balance things properly. So I think, because otherwise, even though, it's not in the interest of the politician to even not unless he's starting up. There's a difference between business and politics. So if you're running a propaganda machine for your political party, that's different. But if you're actually running a business, even as a politician, you have to make sure that you're following proper business principles. And it makes a lot of sense to make sure that your publication is independent. The only thing that, or your medium is independent. The only thing that may work to the advantage of the media owner, as politician, is the fact that, okay, he might be able to get discounts, or he might be able to use, have access. But, I think that's all it should be limited to.
Because that has been one of the biggest failures in Africa anyway, because once these favors have got to be returned once they are asked, and they've got to come back. Coming to the UK, for example, and the Trumpet Newspaper, which we haven't actually discussed for quite a while. The Trumpet the idea came from the Trumpet, and the Trumpet has been in existing almost the same period as
24 years. No, more than the GAB Awards.
More than the GAB Awards.
So the newspaper started in 1995, which is 24 years ago. And the GAB Awards started in 1999, which is about 21 years ago.
Now, I'm looking at the newspaper as a whole, and the publication as it has been going, and the things that have been printed out, and the success stories, together with the stories that have, of course, are not very successful. Now, over a period of time, how has this opinion changed in not being, because you are very impartial in a sense that you talk about the things as they are, but in terms of being political correct, or in terms of saying this is my advice on this issue, because we have tended to do that as Africans. We tend sometimes not to bring out what we are, to bring out what we are talking about, or what we want to come out, but we say something that we feel the way things should have been done. Now, how has the paper been partial with that?
Right from the onset in 1995, it's always been part of our editorial policy, and it's something that we actually made public at the time, that we are going to be balanced, we're going to be liberal, that we'll always entertain both sides of an argument. There will be rare cases where we'll probably take a position, especially when it comes to things like editorials and so on. But the whole idea is that it makes a lot of sense, and in the interest of fairness and the interest of justice and equity, it makes a lot of sense that you actually you make your publication a pot of various ideas, various views, and allow people to express it. And when you even look at where we are today in terms of social media, the internet, and so on, I don't think you have a choice to do than to act otherwise.
Because otherwise you won't compete. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is that I read a couple of articles from the Trumpet Newspaper, and during the Nigerian elections, there was a lot of Atiku and very little Buhari.
In Trumpet?
In the Trumpet Newspaper.
I don't think so.
Now, that brought me to...
I don't think so.
To say that, no, you might say that the people who are writing the articles were basically, well, interested in mentioning Atiku and not mentioning Buhari. Because the whole thing was, I can look at, 2, 3 articles, I think, you know, and it starts off very well and talking about the elections and they want a winner to take it all, and you know, then suddenly you're seeing Atiku.
No, that wasn't. That definitely wasn't Trumpet. That definitely wasn't Trumpet.
You want me to mention the articles?
Yes, please.
There were several of them.
Yes, please.
But they were all falling towards Atiku, and I was thinking, hang on a minute, this is supposed to balance the whole thing. It's supposed to mention Buhari as well.
I can assure you that I can assure you that we gave both sides, you know, fair coverage.
Yeah.
I would even be tempted to think that there was probably more coverage of Buhari.
Yeah.
Again, because he was the incumbent president, obviously there were a lot of activities of his government that were going into the news anyway. So, but you know, we've always maintained a balance.
I may ask you this because I've always wanted this opinion from any Nigerian. I'm sorry if you find it in a way. Who did you support in the elections?
Put it this way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I should be answering that question. No, and I have a reason. I am proud of where my sympathies lie. Very proud of where my sympathies lie.
Yeah.
But I think there's a risk that, because I as an individual, I'm totally separate from the publication.
All right.
You know, and that's why, because I'm here, wearing a business hat, and you know, it's important that, you know, I cannot afford, you know, I cannot afford to sort of get it mixed up. But I will simply say that I'm happy with what Nigeria has achieved so far.
No, what I thought was you were going to say, look, the best person maybe won the elections. And the best person, whoever was chosen by the Nigerian people, I go with. I may not have wanted the opinion, but I went with it anyway. So is the Nigerian president, and I'm very proud that, you know, that's what I expected.
Yeah, but you probably didn't listen. You probably didn't listen to me well. But you know, for the benefit of doubt, the publication has its own position. Now, if you're talking in terms of and the position of the publication is to give all the candidates fair coverage. As far as I'm concerned, as an individual, if one was to look at all the candidates that we had, I think the best for Nigeria is what we have now. And let me qualify that, because when I say the best, of all the candidates that we had, I think the best candidate is the one who is here now. There are certain things that Nigeria needs in terms of things like, you know, anti-corruption, things in terms of, you know, prudent spending, diversification of the economy, and so on and so forth. And I think there's been some level of track record that has been achieved, even in very difficult times, as far as the country is concerned. And so I feel that as far as, you know, what we have now, I think that's probably, the Nigerian people have spoken. And I think they've made a good choice.
All right. We're coming towards the end of the program, and this is one of the last things that I may have to ask you. What is your opinion on religion and politics? Because I saw a religious lady supporting, you know, Atiku during the elections, and then I saw another religious man supporting Buhari during the elections, and it sort of affecting this. I thought religious people would have been neutral in terms of these elections. You know the religious lady I'm talking about, probably.
Do I?
Well, you probably saw her anyway. Mama I should leave her name out of this.
Okay.
But in terms of thinking, I just need your opinion.
Okay, let me start by correcting something though, because if I believe you're talking about the same person that we saw, you know, I'm not sure if she was supporting a specific candidate, because much as I saw a picture with, you know, with one candidate, I also saw her with the vice presidential candidate of the other political party as well. So, you know, I think it's important to sort of make that clarification. Now, you're asking about, you're saying that perhaps religious leaders should be, you know, should be independent or neutral. Now, just as you were not expecting me as a newspaper publisher to be, you know, to be neutral, I think religious leaders are Nigerians. They're entitled to have their views. They're entitled to vote. Where they must not cross the line is a situation where they're now saying that because they're supporting a particular political candidate, which is their own prerogative, that all the members of their congregation has to support that candidate. And we saw so many cases where, you know, we had religious leaders come on the pulpit, insist that, you know, telling their members to vote for a particular candidate, and the members voted in the opposite direction. So I don't think they should mix, but I also believe that religious leaders, you know, should be part of politics. In fact, they need to be playing a more active role in the politics of the country. You cannot have a situation where you're saying that political leaders are bad and so on. Okay, if you religious leaders feel that you have the moral integrity to be in politics, then, you know, so be it.
Okay. Well, Mr. Femi, thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much
for today's program, and I do hope that next time when we invite you again, you will be more than willing to come around. Viewers back home, I just thank you very, very much for listening to us, and I do hope we'll be again together next week for the next edition of Africa Speaks. Thank you for viewing, and may God bless you.